Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you'd like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion right here, right now, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show. And one last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now, I'd also like to do a quick shout out to my Patreon, so a couple of my unicorns. So big shout out to Kamikaze Gilmore, Leonardo Gonzalez and Colin Dresser, who are all Nathan Oakley 1980 channel members at the unicorn level. So big shout out to all of you. And we are joined by 10th Man, Rebel, and a whole bunch of people in Discord. So welcome one and all.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everybody.
Hello, hello. Any signs of a physical Earth curve obstruction, formerly known as their horizon?
Well, there was a time in this debate over the nature of this Earth that they used to say that the Earth curve was physical and it was obstructing the bottom of boats and buildings. But it seems like they've had a change of mind now.
Any
What do you mean they
evidence?
changed their mind? It's in the calculation. It's marked as X. Tangent.
Yeah, spot on, Rebel. Yeah, it does seem that way. And I don't know if you were alluding to that at before the live show started. But yeah, you've got people who will then deny their own religion. It is their horizon. Their horizon is geometric. The fact that they come here and now deny the fact that they'd ever see a geometric horizon when it's marked with an X, labelled horizon and claimed to be blocking things in the distance, is absurd. But that is literally where the cognition of the fundies who challenge us has been led. To deny their own religion, to deny the very physicality of their geometry that they claimed proved Earth was a sphere for the last 3, 4, 5 years. Hey, Chocolate?
Well, Nathan, how can these purveyors of science and
Good morning.
the nature of our Earth put an X there? Is that arbitrarily put there, or was that put there for a reason?
But they're based on the R value in their geometric model.
Oh, so they have an R value that gave them the evidence they needed to appropriately mark X there instead of somewhere else.
Yes.
And then when we asked them, how come that X doesn't work, i.e. the black swan, all of a sudden they're into apparent and
Imaginary.
optics and imaginary.
Yeah,
But the
suddenly
whole
it's
thing, though, guys,
it's
it's like a chicken and egg question. What came first, the measurement or observation? If their calculator is based on observation, where they marked the X that they measured, and we cannot observe, but they claiming that, well, it's there because our calculator says it's there. Well, then, if we can't observe, what led to the measurement? It's like a gigantic flip-flop. Every time you point to their calculator, they say, well, it's because it was observed. You say, well, you can't observe it. Say, well, it's there because we calculated it. It's a clusterfuck.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
I'm sorry, go
No,
ahead.
I was just saying, yes, absolutely correct. I describe it as the entire model imploding on itself. You asked about the NASA trajectories before we started the live show and said, well, they won't work if you haven't got a calculable R value. And I'm like, yeah, that's yet another thing on the list that hadn't been ticked off yet. Correct, all space travel. Not that we need to debunk that, really. They're travelling to a fake place. But you're still correct. All of their trajectories are based on that R value. And if that's dead, then all of that is also dead. Like I say, it's not necessary. You can't have a sky vacuum. We'd not be breathing. But nevertheless, it's still just another thing on the list that would also fall to pieces.
I was going to say, based on his last statement, did they observe the radius of the Earth from the center to the surface, or did they measure that? Can you see through the Earth to observe it?
They could not have reached the center. Allegedly, they only drilled 8 miles down. So that's out of the window.
So your statement of did they observe it, the chicken and the egg? Well, how did they get the center of the Earth to the surface if it's not observation? How did they come to that number?
It's imaginary, right? That's all it is at the end of the day.
Seat of the pants?
What they're claiming essentially is they're saying is we just imagined the sphere for thousands of years without shred of evidence. And once we invented instrument of flight, guess what? We've nailed it. It's like winning a lottery, winning every lottery that ever existed every time. It was just a lucky guess. But that's essentially what they're saying. That's insane.
It was leaps of logic and guesswork.
But by the seat of the pants.
The way they actually phrase it, I think it's Andrew Thomas Young's website, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's to say that you'd have to take geometric considerations for a non-physical location. In other words, even though the horizon moves with the weather, if you consider it with geometric consideration, I think that is the terminology. In other words, you can think of it as being physical. That's essentially what they're saying. That's their starting point.
Yeah, he said pretty much all the above, which was the above meaning the entire page on refraction and all the mathematics and all of that has been done on plane surfaces, but the Earth isn't flat. To have this work around, paraphrasing, to have this work around a curved atmosphere, we need to take geometric considerations, and that will be on a separate page. So yeah,
it's the bait and switch. So AB Science has utilised this recently. In other words, talk about Snell's law, talk about actual effects of refraction, and then swindle in R, 7/6R. So they've got a section in their mathematics called refraction. So people assume that because it says refraction in the title, it's suddenly dealing with the optics of the world we deal in, or even dealing in refraction, which it isn't. So the refraction in the curve mathematics is based on R value, i.e. 7/6R. That's terrestrial refraction. It's geometric, and it's necessitated by R, and R gives you a geometric horizon. But their whole model still collapses, even though some of the fundies out there will assume that because it's using this word refraction, that means it's dealing in some way with the optics of the world we deal in. It's not. It's dealing with geometry. It's dealing with an R value. They're terrestrial refractions based on radius. So you still need that terrestrial refraction value giving you an R value, giving you a geometric horizon, which they haven't got anymore. So the thing still falls to pieces.
I haven't gone back because it's such a long show yesterday with Unorthodox, but I want to go back and really pay attention to how he just did what you just explained. He brought in refraction and he tried to tie it to the sphere. And he never explained the 5 effects of refraction that, QE had put up there from their own subject matter expert. So I was hoping, but the show was going too long. I was hoping somebody would, because I wanted to, please explain to me all the facets of refraction, and let's see if they can do what you say your refraction is doing now.
yeah, but he couldn't even get to that because he had too much time deciphering whether we have one horizon or 2.
Well,
So
right,
wait a second.
but-
Unorthodox was talking about was arguing refraction. If they're arguing refraction, how on earth can they calculate the physical edge?
They can't.
I mean, they're just dead in the water as soon as they're out of the word.
They can't. What they do is they will say that they'll go out of their way to explain how all the lines to anything that we're looking at in any picture's bent. Everything's refracted. That's their current standpoint. Well, if everything's refracted, how do you draw a straight tangent? Tangent, by definition, is a straight line meeting the curved surface. If they're claiming the curved surface is what they're utilising for their geometry, then they need a tangent. That's what geometry is. So, without a straight line, because it's all refracted, they're no longer capable of doing geometry. Now, we should have spotted this when we argued about the Isle of Man. I've said this a few times. There's the Isle of Man in front of us. It's claimed to be refracted. And they argue and fudge the values at how much over R they're going to use. But it's still dictated by R, it's still dictated by radius, and according to them, all the targets when we argued about the Isle of Man were refracted. So they're still doing a straight line to the tangent point which is claimed to be blocking the things in the distance, but then simultaneously bending all the lines for the targets. Now, we didn't spot that, in essence, if you've got bent lines, you can't do a tangent. But we didn't spot that. Now it's got to the point where they're saying, overtly saying, the horizon itself is refracted. Now, if you overtly state that the thing that you're going to be using for your geometry is refracted, bent lines, then you're no longer doing geometry. It is absolutely game over for the globe. The white swan destroys it at every angle. The curved maths dies. Along with the geometry and the assertion we live on a sphere. That's the ground level, ground-based, asserted proof that we're on a sphere. Here we prove it with geometry. It's what you see, based on this math, side on, no perspective. Here you go, that's the proof you're on a sphere. As soon as they relinquish the idea of doing geometry at all, because everything's refracted, the whole thing collapses.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the same story that you're trying to cram down our throats in regards to Aristophanes, right? We knew for 2,000 years we live on sphere because of that guy who put the sticks in the ground or whatever, looked down the wells. And we argued, I argued that it's impossible to measure the distances or defer anything from that measurement. And they were saying, no, you're wrong. It's been proven until, what's his face? The Grace Tyson comes out and says, no, you can't tell whether it's a sphere or plane just by looking in the wells in 2 different points. And now they shut up. It's the same story. They cram down our throats in regards to the physical edge, the abstraction of the objects at the distance. And now they say, no, that never happened. We can never see a horizon. That's not what we were saying. It's just the same shell game.
Yeah, it's just a shell game. Correct. But in terms of the timeline that's asserted, it's Aristarchus and his shadows saying we're on a sphere, followed by Al-Biruni getting a horizon dip, followed by the assumption from there on in. So the assumption that you have an R value is then perpetuated as being the proof that we've got a sphere beneath our feet. What cracks me up when people use Aristophanes is that often they'll quote directly from Wikipedia, and in Wikipedia it even says that he assumes the R value. So he's assuming a spherical surface when he's doing his sticks and shadows or wells, depending on which version of the story you get. Nevertheless, it's based on an assumption of R, and it overtly states it in most of the sources about that particular claim to be experiment. Well, who was the one who... Gary Awesome did it. So Gary Awesome was like, we know it's a sphere, and then he quoted off the sticks and shadows nonsense. It's like, but the point was, even in his own rhetoric, when he's reading that out, he overtly states, and he assumes it's a sphere. You couldn't quite believe what he was doing. He's using it as a proof, and then overtly stating that the assumption is that the Earth's a sphere. So you're like, God, you guys don't even read your own sources when you're parroting off this crap as though it's a proof that we're on a sphere. We're not. It didn't prove it. It started with an assumption, like they all do.
It's right in front of them. I got feedback again.
Yeah, but they claim Aristophanes, based on his alleged experiment, was able to calculate the radius, which even if all true is impossible, because we have to fucking know the distance to the object, the sun, in order to do that. Even if all above was true, just the whole thing is ridiculous.
Can you pop yourself on mute because I'm getting feedback when you're not talking?
It did.
Okay, good. So let's look at it this way. Whenever I went with my boat when I had it to Catalina, depending on how fast I was going there in knots, I knew when I'd get there because I knew the distance, 26 miles. I'm looking at these two oil platforms. We know the distances that they are. They're listed in the state mandate of oil companies to be so far out. And so it's not just QE or BLMSB 69 that say it's this far out. It's a matter of record. And I looked it up and we put it on screen. We know that they're, depending from where you're measuring, what was it, 6.2 and 9.4 miles out or so forth. Does that change? I mean, if you were to get on a boat and go from the shore to there at a certain speed, would you not arrive there according to the speed and the distance at a certain time frame? So now these guys are saying that we're looking at that thing, but that thing got refracted. But if I go test it to see if that refraction actually happened, it doesn't prove because I'm seeing one oil platform and then the other right behind it. I could see that visible distance with my own eyes, but they're saying my eyes is saying those things are further out than they should be. So when I go to test it by going there on the boat, they always come up with the same time based on the speed, based on the distance. So it's a nonsense argument. They're not refracted. Those are physical things right there.
Well, yeah, they need to be. They certainly need the horizon to be physical. They certainly need to be able to draw a straight tangent to it.
Yeah, and the horizon's always behind
in terms
it.
of refraction.
Again?
In terms of refraction, the objects can appear slightly looming or stooping, if I'm pronouncing it right. In other words, lower or higher, just a little bit, right? Which underlines the whole notion, I guess, supports the argument that giving the refraction, you cannot determine the distance to the horizon. You cannot put the tangent line because you don't know what the hell that is. It's sort of there, approximately where it is, right? But you cannot determine. And that's, for me, where the argument stops. If you cannot determine the distance to horizon, that's it. The game is over.
Correct.
That's where unorthodox made a fatal mistake yesterday when he says, but the military uses it. No, they don't. They'd be missing the targets.
That's right. That's right. Don't forget the Coriolis.
Yeah. Oh my gosh! Now you brought something else. You got Coriolis and refraction.
What Coriolis?
Well, Coriolis allegedly that the military uses to shoot their shells. I think that George, was arguing that. Oh my God, he was saying they had to shoot 20 miles to the angle east to west to reach the target by the time the shell lands.
Yeah, but what about the object not being there and it's refracted? You're hitting a ghost. So you got Coriolis to take into consideration and a refraction. Good luck.
Shout out to theflatearthchannel.com who says coronavirus is a hoax. I know this is true anyway from your comments, Rebel, but your discussion today is indicative of those who understand the Black Swan argument. In other words, upon understanding it, you seem very relaxed. That's the first thing I'd note. The second thing I'd note is that you're describing all the things in their model that just fall completely to pieces based on this single argument. And it's a lot of their argument that falls to pieces. Anything that's revolving around the geometry of a sphere Earth, which is most of their argument. And it all falls to pieces. So if you get it, your discussion type turns to the type that Rebel's using, which is to say, you say, oh, well, this also falls apart, and that all falls apart, and how can they assert this? And how can they assert... Yeah, that's your general tone if you understand this argument.
Yeah, but it's important for me to spot when people make these fundamental assumptions. And in pre-show, I was mentioning about my struggles with relatives. Once they start talking to me about trying to dispute my notion or the argument, and they're making these fundamental assumptions, and not just one, but many upon many upon many, one assumption based on another. So I had to stop them in the track and say, okay, well, let's just examine this very fundamental premise that you're basing your argument with. And they just lose their shit. They cannot imagine that the fundamental basis that they base their argument on may not be correct. And that's, for them, is just the end of the world. That's the end of the discussion. That's where at home start. And that's the tricky part, is to stop.
Yeah, because who are you
people
to
in
be
their
able
tracks.
to point that out? That's what it is. It's that feeling of who are you to be able to point that out to me? Why would I know that?
Yeah. I don't know. It's some kind of psychological struggle that, I wasn't able to break through yet.
Pride.
Yeah, I've had people tell
They're
me
using the white coat syndrome a lot. They're appealing.
Yeah, it's sad. It's really, really sad. But I don't know what to do.
For example, I hear a lot, who are you? Who do you think you are to tell me this? You took my horizon away.
I was told even better than that. Oh, you think you're so smart? Then take your argument, go and argue with the professor in university. Make a video, then send it to me. Then I'll believe it. Can you imagine?
Yeah, but that's saying that's.
I thought of a good one.
I see this as projection. In most instances, those kinds of responses are projection. So what I gleaned from that, Rebel, is my authority wears a white coat and has told me it's a sphere. You go and get an equal value authority figure to tell me what you're telling me, and I'll accept that. So it says I defer to authority figures. My authority figure doesn't agree with you, and I hold him in higher esteem than you. Therefore, you need to get someone of equal esteem. Further to that, it also, and this is something I've been talking about recently, also to me demonstrates that that person is their own victim. They're lying to themselves. They've been presented with information, but they choose to not go and grab a guy who's actually wearing a white coat, go and drag a source off Wiki. No, just defer to their own logic in terms of what they understood from the white coats that have indoctrinated them. But at that moment, it becomes self-indoctrination. They are fighting for their own cause, and therefore, at the point that they, if they ever came round to the truth, said, how is it possible that I have been deceived? Who am I going to blame? Well, you were the one telling yourself that the white coats were right. And you hadn't double-checked what the white coat said, you hadn't looked further into where their sources lied, you hadn't done primary source research, you hadn't looked into geometry, you hadn't done any of that. You just accepted at face value what a guy who seemed to be an authoritarian figure told you, and from that point in, you defended it yourself. There was no moment where they got their phone out and went to Wiki or did anything research-wise. At that moment, they just said, no, I decide you're wrong.
That's right.
Couldn't have said it better, Nathan. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think most of the people I interact with, including my relatives, I know they're smart, and I think it's a case of cognitive dissonance. They hang so much of their life beliefs on this rope of the heliocentrism without ever checking the integrity of it. And if anybody comes and says, by the way, your rope is about to snap, and so they realize the whole entire belief system is out of the window, and they have to re-examine everything. They can't do that.
Imagine if you'd spent your entire life using a spoon back to front, holding the dished end of the spoon and using the other end, because that's what you were told by your parents, for the sake of argument. And that, by analogy, is the comparison of being told you're on a sphere. And by coincidence, everyone around you, your whole family, which is quite a large extended family, also do the same thing. They use the reverse end of the spoon. And one day you go out into the general populace, and someone says to you, you do realise you're using the spoon the wrong way round. Now, at that moment, you've got a choice. Either accept that what you assume to be correct is wrong, or challenge the person based on your current understanding. And that is the moment where you decide, well, no, why would it, how could it be that I've been deceived? Now, where you say cognitive dissonance, I say pure pride. You prefaced it by saying they're intelligent people. That, to me, again, suggests to a higher degree that it would be pride that would stand in the way. How could I have been deceived? Well, I'm not stupid.
But isn't
I'm
that
intelligent.
part of cognitive dissonance?
Yeah, when you've got two opposing thoughts being held at the same time, but that wasn't given in your example. In this example, you've just got a worldview and a challenge to that worldview, and the only thing you've got in your mind is, how could I have been deceived? How could I be wrong about this? I'm not a stupid person. Well, therefore I'm not wrong about this. You're wrong about this. That's how it goes. That's pride.
If I was wrong about this, I would have already figured it out, and I wouldn't need you to tell me. So who do you think you are for telling me what I should have known?
How would you have figured this out before me? How could you know this before? Exactly, Chocolate. How could you know this before I knew this? If this was something that was real, I'd know it already, because I'm an intelligent person. The fact that I don't realise it and you're telling it me means it's wrong, because I know differently. So how are you to tell me this? I would know it already if it was correct.
So at this point, it becomes basically a pissing contest. You claiming you are smarter than I am, and I don't think so, right? That's all it is.
Not you're smarter than me. How could I have been deceived? So it's not necessarily at the first stage externalized onto you. Yeah, it will be eventually. It always is projected straight back onto you. You're dumb. You must have heard that at least a few times, right? Not necessarily from your family, but from people
bingo, for sure.
Right. Well, that's their way of projecting onto you. How could I have been deceived? Well, I haven't, and you're telling me something contrary to what I know is correct. Therefore, you are the stupid one. And when it's like, hold on, that might actually be... No, I'm not stupid. I wouldn't be deceived. How could that possibly be? You're stupid. Don't you know about the blah, blah, blah?
If you are stupid, then anything you say is invalid, right? That's where the circle meets.
Especially when the programming leads people to demonise flat earthers in general. That's obviously been ramped up of recent years. But if you can get the person in the the globe side, the opposing side to us, to automatically know instinctively that a flat earther is stupid, then anything they say can automatically out of hand be disregarded as stupid. And you can overtly tell them, because that's tolerated at a society level as well. It's absolutely expected to ridicule a flat earther as being an idiot. Therefore, you've got a position where somebody has an understanding that's challenged, and the challenge might even cognitively, if your example of cognitive dissonance makes sense, and that might be the thing that triggers them, the two opposing positions. But then they've got to make a choice between the position that makes sense, presumably you put a coherent argument across in whatever subject you're talking about, versus what they've been told by Mr. Whitecoat. And then they, at that moment, they make their choice about whether or not they could have been deceived. And obviously, if they're challenging and saying, no, I couldn't be incorrect in this regard, you must be wrong, you must be stupid. And their wiring says, of course this guy's stupid, he's a flat earther. He's just told me he thinks it's flat. So he's obviously an idiot. And so the programming progresses out with them berating you, ridiculing you, and getting on with their day, annoyed at you for being so stupid.
Well,
yeah,
Nathan,
it's also like you're correct. All of the above. Well, also, I think there's a big component of mob theory. It's ability to belong to group, and I find the most people who are opposed or completely disregarding offhand and hand wave the argument are the people who value social gathering and being part of a community. I find those people are the most difficult to talk to, because in their mind, if they are, for instance, even as much as to think differently than the rest of the group, they just not want to even attempt that.
I believe that, because most of the time the thought will be, oh, what will other people think about me? right? And how I feel about this. Not is this actually the truth? And let me actually deal with
Correct. Yes.
the
Yes.
reality that whether it is or not. If it is, then I have to deal with the reality. Oh, people are going to look at me crazy and think I'm a psychopath for thinking the Earth is flat.
That's
Before we
it.
lose,
That's it.
hang on, please. Before we lose this pertinent point, there's two times ever since I've been on this show that I've heard someone address Nathan Oakley as the grocery delivery boy. It happened yesterday with Unorthodox because his argument became untenable. He had to fight geometry. Prior to that, it happened with Bob at Globusters because Nathan went on and shared the scientific method properly. And Bob couldn't handle that, so he said that. Well, wear that badge proudly, Nathan.
Yeah, for my actual career, I was an international rep for an electronics manufacturer. I was like James Bond. I was flying all over the place, going into studios, dealing with famous people, rich people. That was my actual job. And then, right, I branched from that. I started doing YouTube and wanted to do YouTube. So ramping down to a part-time job, I just found something random, which was delivering. I did it for a relatively short period of time while I transitioned into doing full-time YouTube. But that has now been labelled my job. It's like one of the channels I've got is called Oakley Cord, and it's riddled with all the equipment and hi-fi that I used to do when I was an international rep. But yet the label I've got is grocery delivery boy. You're like, okay, well, fair enough. I did actually do that. But in many ways, and it only occurred to me when an Orthodox said it yesterday, it's like, actually, that sounds terrible. If I remove my prideful aspect of, well, that's a label about me being a grocery delivery boy, and think about it in terms of how it actually projects out about the argument, he basically phrased it in such a way that made it sound like grocery delivery boy debunks the science of heliocentrism. That's how it ended up being paraphrased from what he was basically saying. I'm like, my God, that sounds awful for the globe side. You know, it does sound terrible.
But that's how it
But
came
Nathan,
out
I mean,
because
all of us
this
at
was
some point in
after
time held.
being destroyed. Oh, I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, but all of us, I mean, at least I assume at some point held different jobs like delivery boys, construction workers, plumbers, cleaners. You know, we have to start somewhere. Even if you're a professor somewhere, doesn't mean that's your title forever. That's ridiculous.
Right on. I mean,
What Tent said is very, very important.
I
which
had
bit?
a janitorial business, and I was averaging $50 an hour cleaning other people's toilets. Huh, I loved it.
Yeah.
Sorry, which I don't
Let's
think that was
not
the
let
bit.
what Tent go unnoticed. What Tent said go unnoticed, because that's, you know, when you have him there. When I debate them, they always, when I get them in something, they tell me, you're a high school dropout. What do you know? When you hear that, Nathan, you know you've won, bro.
Oh yeah, oh no, I do totally appreciate that. When AB Science claimed that I hadn't got flamethrowers in the Black Swan, I was actually a meth addict. Obviously, I instantly smirked and went, this is going to be good. Open with an ad hom. Wicked. I've definitely won this one before it's even started. So yeah, no, I totally appreciate that.
Yep.
Man, you have a thick skin, I tell you.
I worked in sales
When
most
they
of my
ad
life,
hom you,
so
you know you have them, you know they're crying. And trust me, they're crying with the Black Swan. They're having nightmares.
yeah.
I think you gotta have a bit of a thick skin because I'm pretty sure we're probably very hated by these guys. And who cares?
Well, you got that right, Chocolate.
I think
'Cause we're sitting here destroying your model.
just going to do a quick shout out. Sorry.
Yeah,
You know
we
what I
have to
heard
have
of
a
the other
thick
day?
skin to be in this debate. I mean, probably everybody around me, including my relatives, hate my guts. Some of them tell straight to my face. Most of them don't. Like it's real painful for me. I don't know about you guys, what communities you belong to and families around you, but like I'm just not having fun at all. But I mean, you can't see the matrix and then unsee it. You just can't do it. It's part of you. This is just what it is. So you have to have a thick skin.
Right, just do a quick shout out
That
to.
comes with the territory.
Bear with me a second. I just want to shout out Eric. He's giving me a super chat. He's giving me money. Come on. Right, Eric McNeely, thank you very much for the super chat. Those who are able to see beyond the shadows and lies of their culture will never be understood, let alone believed by the masses. Plato. Oh, wow.
Plato.
I'm going to read that again. That's a great quote. Those who are able to see beyond the shadows and lies of their culture will never be understood, let alone believed by the masses. Plato. Love it. Thank you very much for the super chat, Eric.
That's a great quote.
Yeah. You remember that game where the tagline in the commercials were, "You sunk my battleship." Now we can do that with their Horizon.
Battleship.
You sunk my Horizon.
You stole my optics.
That was my favorite. Oh, you don't understand the difference between physical and optics.
Yeah, they're all doing the same. They're all doing the same line.
Yeah.
Again, AB Science did exactly the same thing. We explained it. I can't remember if it was the beginning of this live show or the pre-show, but he's essentially doing the same bait and switch they all do. Talk about atmospheric refraction. Talk about Snell's law. Bring up a load of diagrams. Make yourself seem really smart. Now, I'm sure, or I'm not going to. I didn't even challenge any of his mathematics on Snell's law. Why would I? Is refraction real? Yeah. Could he qualify it in an educated way? Yeah. Can he do a good job of demonstrating all of the mathematics for refraction? Yeah. I'm sure AB Science did a fantastic job of detailing Snell's law. But then he slipped in the geometric atmospheric refraction that's used in the geometric Earth curve calculator, which has sod all to do with Snell's law and everything to do with R. It's 7/6R. So it's the classic bait and switch when it comes to terrestrial refraction and Earth curve geometry. Talk about refraction, make people realise you know exactly what you're talking about when it comes to refraction, and then surreptitiously start talking about terrestrial refraction. Maybe not even mention that fact. Just bring up a diagram of an Earth with a curved line drawn around it. That'll be the 7/6R Earth curve terrestrial refraction. That's not the refraction that was being detailed in terms of Snell's law. He even justified it that way. Like, I wasn't even talking about the geometry. I was talking about terrestrial refraction. I was talking about Snell's law. It's like, no, you were addressing the Black Swan. And in your address to the Black Swan directly, you talked about Snell's law so that you can bait and switch us with the terrestrial refraction that's used in the Earth curve geometry. Because that's the refraction when you're talking about these models side on, with lines and curves drawn, and claim geometry based on R. That's the Earth curve proof that's being utilised when he sticks a white swan on screen. But it's a bait and switch. Talk about refraction, make yourself seem educated so people trust you, and then switch it for terrestrial refraction, 7/6R, based on a radius, giving you a physical geometric horizon, something that he continually tells us we're not going to see. So your R value refraction all falls to pieces. I wasn't even talking about that. I was talking about Snell's law. It's like, no, what you're going to justify it by using the bait that you used and claim that, oh no, I was only using this bait. It wasn't anything to do with the actual argument. No, you came on camera to debunk the Black Swan with a big smirk grin on your face, thinking you're doing really well, telling people about Snell's law. And then when you declared that you hadn't done any maths, that was where you switched it for terrestrial refraction. Maybe AB Science is actually not getting the fair crack of the whip here. Maybe he's too stupid to appreciate when he declared that he hadn't done any mathematics. Hadn't spent, 15 straight minutes doing mathematics for Snell's law. What he actually meant is, I'm not doing any of the mathematics that actually addresses the Black Swan, because that's using geometry and terrestrial refraction. So I'll make you think I'm doing lots of mathematics and know what I'm talking about, only to later openly declare I've not done any maths for this. But that was the point that he switched in his bullshit about Snell's law with geometric refraction. Bait and switch. Simple.
Yeah. It's so
But as soon as they
easy
argue
to spot now
refraction,
when they do this. Like it's almost just just comedy when they try to sneak in their little tactics. like we don't hear what they're saying. I mean, I don't know this AV science guys. He knew did he not was he not around for all these years when all of his side was arguing for physical geometry of a ball, obscuring objects and boats and buildings and all this crap?
Of course not. He was busy sniffing his own farts, telling himself he was a scientist.
gas pressure.
Good one, bro.
But Nathan, as soon as somebody brings a refraction in the argument in regards to distance to horizon, can't we just stop the argument right there
Yeah, you can.
and not talk about the types of the refractions and whatnot?
That's you're a man after my own heart, Rebel, right? But just don't gang up on QE with this. So my attitude is precisely that. That's the end of the argument, the punctuation mark. The problem, and this is why QE, I hope he doesn't mind me speaking on his behalf, he wants people to implicitly understand what refraction actually is and highlight the fact that none of the refractive effects that are detailed in terms of actual atmospheric refraction are going to do what they say will happen with the horizon. None of the actual atmospheric effects are going to do that to the horizon, ever. And they're not going to do it to the geometric horizon, because that's beyond geometric capabilities. It stops being geometric. So therefore, it's not applicable. Now, AB Science was saying, none of this is applicable, because this only applies to a geometric horizon. And we don't have a geometric horizon. And he's saying it with a smug look on his face, like he's doing well. Because he's obviously not actually appreciated the argument. The argument is that you definitely require a geometric horizon, marked with an X, labelled horizon in your geometric model, claimed to be blocking things and bending at altitude. You've definitely got one, it's definitely geometric, it's defined as such. However, you can't actually do geometry if you haven't got a geometric horizon. So relinquishing it and saying, we haven't got one, we'd never see it, essentially destroys your mathematics. So the concession is us.
Right. I understand why QE does it. He wants to educate people, I think, as to that refraction that is being spoken of has nothing to do with refraction as we understand. So
Well,
they then
not exactly.
go into, oh, that's an extreme refraction, or it's some kind of a special refraction.
Not exactly.
But that just becomes
Not exactly, no.
becomes
Just let
an
me correct
argument
you.
about the
Sorry,
refraction.
Rebel, I'm really sorry to interrupt. Just want to correct you. No. The effects of actual refraction in the air that we look through can't correlate to moving the horizon by definition. So if you're talking about looming, for example, it's things moving with respect to the horizon. Same with sinking. They're all described with
That's
respect.
what I was saying, yes.
Yeah, so
I'm
none
agreeing
of
with
those
you.
effects are actually utilised to be juxtaposed with 7/6R when QE goes through them, so people understand that if they say looming, it doesn't actually work by definition. That's not an effect that you can do with looming, because things are moving in looming terms with respect to the horizon. Not the horizon looming above the horizon. That's completely non sequitur. But I just want to get you back on track to where you started this, and I agreed with you, which is that, no, at the moment you utilise any sort of refraction, you're no longer doing geometry. That's game over. You need a geometric horizon to do geometry. You need a tangent line to do geometry. And as soon as you say you haven't got those things, it's game over geometry.
Right, yes. I agree with everything you said. I meant to say that perhaps QE's intent was to educate the refraction in any known a variation of it does not at all constitute the observation, that the two do not align. It doesn't exist. So then they go to talk about special type of refraction, right? And it just becomes the game of, what refraction is. And as you said, my point would be, it's just not, as soon as the word refraction is uttered, I think that's where the argument stops. It doesn't really matter what type of refraction.
I'm in concurrence with you there, because if we're talking about standard refraction, from this terrestrial refraction, the one based on R, that just got destroyed and debunked. Oh, you don't have an R. So then you don't have any terrestrial refraction. Argument done.
Yeah, that's where I'd draw the line.
Yeah, but for me, that's too far. Yeah, that's too far. As soon as refraction is uttered, that means we're no longer dealing with geometry. That's where the game ends for me. Like, if we go into the refraction, that's just. I understand why people do that,
You're
but I don't
absolutely
think it's
right, because you
necessary.
can't have a refracted horizon. Because if everything's refracted, how did you measure anything?
Every time
With
this comes up,
actuality.
just by coincidence, the Isle of Man's on screen, and it's like it's taunting me. We should have spotted this when we were arguing about the Isle of Man 2 years ago. That's when we should have spotted this. We didn't. We let them draw a straight line to a tangent. So we let them have the horizon with straight line geometry, and then talk about refraction all day long and how much they're going to vary it for the Isle of Man moving up and down while they've got this straight line drawn to the horizon. We should have spotted this 2 years ago. And I feel embarrassed that we argued about it so long and didn't spot it.
I've spotted it,
don't.
but I didn't know how to formulate that.
You spotted
I
it, but you
was
didn't know how to
worried-
put it into words.
Correct.
Fair enough.
Could I say something on the refraction thing, Nathan?
Hey, Brian, didn't spot you there.
Hey, I said a little while ago, but everyone was talking, so I don't think you heard me. I think that what QE wants is for all the flat earthers to understand refraction and the 5 effects of refraction, and what looming really is, which is the sky mirroring onto the water and giving the effect, the visual effect of something floating in the air when it's not, as opposed to their version of it from Andrew Thomas Young that they're trying to relinquish now, of something looming up above the horizon, from below the Earth curve that we usually wouldn't see, this kind of thing. So he just wants us to all know what refraction really is and what real looming is. Because even if you go to Google, they'll give you the photographs of the sky mirroring onto the sea, which gives you just the visual effect of a boat or something appearing to float in the air, but it's not. It's still on the water. That's what QE wants. He doesn't care whether they know it or not, because he knows they don't know it, and they keep on not learning it. You think they would have learned it with the fact that we all know it better than them now, more or less, and they're still not learning it, most of them.
They don't know it because they've been screaming refraction. But have they ever mentioned the 5 effects of refraction?
No,
And
most of
determine
them.
exactly how those effects are affecting whatever it is we're seeing? I mean, it's it's just game over from this point. And Nathan, I hear you when you say you kind of feel bad that we didn't catch this before or whatever. I feel like, you know what? I think we had to kind of go through this whole thing just so that we got to this point where we understand it at this level. Because had we found out before, maybe it wouldn't have been this way. So I'm not mad about it. I know you probably are, but I don't know.
Well, it's
I
just
think
two
it's
years
like
ago.
a training thing.
You come to this subject and you've got a really basic understanding of what geometry is. Then you get into this discussion and you're already in it. You're headlong in it. You're in the deep end, having to scramble to figure out what it all means and work it all out on the fly. So you work it all out on the fly. You spend a great deal of time intensely studying this shit to unpick it. But in the process of learning it and unpicking it, you've left this massive, great big seam attached. And when you come back to it a couple of years later and go, holy crap, look at that. It's just, that's holding it together. If I'd have just nipped that with a seam cutter, that would be it. The whole thing would have fallen to pieces there and then, 2 years ago. But here we are now, with it's taken them literally screaming it in our face, the horizon's refracted, for me to go, bloody hell. How are they doing geometry then? Up until that point, we just went along with them. They're saying straight line to the horizon. Beyond that, everything's refracted. It's being loomed up to the horizon. Rumpus even qualified by saying, it's looming because of its position with respect to the horizon. I trimmed it out and republished it. Right? So we're all just going along with this idea of straight line to the physical blockage for your geometry and your tangent, and then looming beyond there. So that's how we're wired. But as soon as it took the breaking point, the straw that breaks the camel's back, is when they say, no, the hard line reference point that's supposed to be blocking stuff is also looming. And then you go, what? Oh yeah, aren't you doing geometry?
Well, that's the black swan, and like a diamond that has many facets. We were going through each facet of the argument back then. Then when QE spotted the horizon behind the second oil platform, he said, wait a minute. And so now the discovery of a facet that we hadn't argued about. And now that is that seam you're talking about.
There was too many arguments. That was one of the arguments back in 2015. But there were so many arguments back then with NASA and all this other nonsense that it just was such a simple argument that people would use it and then they skip on to another argument and they didn't stay with it. So if someone was debating, they'd throw that out there and then, or they'd put that out there about the horizon being too far for what the globe would predict, and then they move on. They get some kind of a rebuttal off of the other side, some kind of like send them down a different tangent, and then they move away from that and start arguing about some other nonsense. Could be NASA, could be anything. So there was so much nonsense to argue about. It's just that it wasn't until now, till end of 2019, early 2020, that that we could actually collectively argue about this and stick on it, because all those other bases were already covered. And I think with the oil and man thing, Nathan, I think that there was probably a lot of stuff that was found out, that was learned through that, even though you could have killed that argument way beforehand. If you had been if you were kind of being more simplistic in thinking about it. But at the time, what can you do? You're just in the trenches, you're arguing. What can you do? You're not going to way. So,
Well,
simple things are harder to see.
Back then, that was before the calculator was even known as the proof of nothing, beg of the question, perspective hijacking curve calculator. So, we were still arguing in that mind state where they hadn't actually hijacked perspective the way they did.
Yeah, but before the black swan, and shout out to QE and BMLS69 for this, they had wiggle room. Now they're dealing with geometry, set in stone, 3959, game over. You can't change that. There's no way out of this.
You can't change it. What are you, stupid? Of course we can change it.
Hold on, you missed a bit of credit.
Science.
Hold on, just one sec. You've missed a bit of credit. So, Taboo Conspiracy was definitely in that chain, and if anything, deserves the most credit. Yes, Quantum Eraser formulated the modus tollens argument and made it solid, made it concrete, made it undebunkable. But the process of him getting to that was through Taboo Conspiracy utilising BLMSB's observation from several years earlier. But he did the math, explained in terms of a qualification of physicality, where the horizon would be, how big the sphere we would be standing on would be with that qualification. And it was that sparked QE to develop it into an absolutely rock-solid modus tollens argument. So a huge amount of credit to Taboo Conspiracy. So Ben, massive shout out to you, my friend.
Thank you, Nathan. I'll keep that in mind.
Word.
Agreed. Thank you, Ben.
Have you guys seen latest Ben's video? He mirrored the video of Matthew channel.
Matthew?
Test on the lake.
I haven't actually. Maybe I have. Fill us in.
Essentially, I can't remember the channel he referenced, even though I subscribed to him right after. You guys have to go check out to Taboo Conspiracy 2 and see what the channel he's referencing. An experiment, well, the test that he did with his wife, somebody else by the name of Matthew did with his father, only with 13 point some kilometers distance. Sorry, rather miles. They did a flashlight test and a laser test. And the peculiar thing about the laser test, laser actually hits dead on right into the lens. It's not like the light you see that is emitting from the distance. The laser beam actually hits the lens of the camera, which was very impressive. You guys have to check it out. Then he lowers the camera all the way to the water, and he talks to his father, and they were doing a synchronized test when he was asking him, Matthew was asking his father to cover the light source with his hand. And you can see every time he would cover the light source that it is indeed the light source that he think it is. So the synchronized tests were great. Anyway, check it out. It's great.
It's level-headed channel.
The original channel's called Level Headed.
Okay, maybe let me check.
No, Taboo posted it. I still need to watch it. It came up on the notification. There was something about Utah and the lake or something. But I think that's the one you're referencing, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Taboo
it,
posted it.
Cool. Well, regardless, you'll definitely be able to find out from Taboo Conspiracy 2. So that's Taboo, then Conspiracy, then a number 2 channel on YouTube. So check it out. That's Ben. That's who we were referencing in regards to crediting for what turned into the Black Swan argument.
That's it, yes.
Must suck.
So anyway, what is this about? Is this the flat Earth society or some sort? Where all you guys are stupid or something? Have you not seen the pictures from space? You guys don't think we live on a sphere?
No, we
What's
did
happening?
not see.
You guys nuts or something? The Aristophanes proved the Earth is round 2,000 years ago. What are you, stupid? You've never been to school? What? This is insane.
Go ahead, Arwen.
Yeah, and I just want to say, no, we have not seen the pictures from space. We've seen pictures on our computer screen that are classified as images that are being told to us have been taken from space towards Earth, even though space's second law of thermodynamics violation in order to get there. Yeah, that can't be possible. And
Well, blah 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 blah. What about those astronauts? You don't believe the astronauts are telling the truth? What? That's stupid. That's conspiracy theory.
Well, if you can find an astronaut that tells the truth, then please point me out who.
There were 2 that said it's flat.
What? All of them are saying the truth. What are you talking about?
Are all your relatives like really camp and half Mexican or something?
Like
a slightly gay Mexican accent going on there.
I don't know what kind of accent it is.
Doesn't know what the hell he is.
Look, let's not ad hom the fake globe head. With that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to today's live panel. If you are watching this on the Nathan Oakley premiering stream, then stay tuned, as there will be hopefully a very light-hearted after show to follow. Be sure to check out nathanoakley.com and the Flat Earth Debate Forum to keep up to date with the community debate. Massive thank you to all who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, and all that good stuff. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on the Nathan Oakley premiering stream, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!